of traffic. It really does get you down after a while. And I think this is the reason why so many people like to go bush for a few weeks every year. And this is exactly what I'm going to do. You're right, mate. I'm going to head up the Oodnadatta track to Alice Springs, then east across the Simpson Desert to Birdsville, then down the Birdsville track, then turn north up the Strzelecki track. So now it's just a matter of going home, packing up, and getting away from all this.
3 days out from Sydney, and Malcolm's in South Australia, heading north towards the Oodnadatta track. This arid, inhospitable region is scorching hot in summer, freezing in winter. Now in October, the temperature peaks each day at 40 degrees. It's sparsely populated, the small, isolated towns servicing local cattle stations and tourists passing through. Maree, at the southern end of the Oodnadatta track, is struggling to recover from the closure in 1981 of the original railway line to Alice Springs. Affectionately called the Gan after the Afghan camel drivers, it's been rerouted further west to country less prone to flash flooding. With the line ripped up and sold off, these engines and carriages, neglected and vandalised, will never move again. From Maree, Malcolm and his offsider Steve head into the driest part of the driest continent on Earth. The pebble-strewn plains are called Gibber Deserts, after an Aboriginal word for stone. In places, the track runs through low hills fringed with lush vegetation. These are mound springs, extraordinary oases formed when water from the Great Artesian Basin is forced to the surface. As the water overflows to seep into the desert, precipitated mineral deposits gradually build up, forming the mounds. Around 80 springs are active in this area. The most spectacular is called simply the bubbles. Gushing water churns fine sand into a slippery mass until it erupts, gleaming gold in the last rays of the setting sun. Small, fragile wetlands are strung along the overflow, and living in the warm, highly mineralised water are thriving colonies of tiny invertebrates. Known as Phreatoicus, these curious creatures are of great scientific interest, and there's concern that the Phreatoicus and other animals may become endangered if the wetlands dry up. An even more surprising find is the desert goby. Able to tolerate extreme changes in its environment to survive, there's still considerable conjecture about how the fish have managed to populate these pools. "200 kilometres north of Maree at William Creek, there's an unusual tourist attraction. 2 battered fuel tanks from the Black Arrow, the rocket that launched Australia's first satellite in 1972. Malcolm always drops in at the William Creek pub to leave a donation for the Flying Doctor service. The trick is to pin the money to the ceiling with one shot.
Oh. The bloke the other night threw $10 up and $5 come down. He said, "Oh,
Malcolm hears about the special talents of the publican son and finds him on the front veranda.
How are you, young fella?
Sure.
What are you doing?
Just throwing a cracker on.
A cracker? What's a cracker?
This part.
Well, can you crack that whip?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Want to show me?
Okay.
Righto. Oh, that's about it, eh? You got to be back to school.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't go. I haven't cracked the whip for 20 years.
Every day, huge road trains roar up the Oodnadatta track to pick up cattle for the southern markets before the searing summer heat makes work impossible. Malcolm, who jackarooed on cattle stations years ago, is heading for the peak station to spend some time in the stock camp and to renew old friendships. At this time of the year, when the wind howls, even the galahs sit tight, complaining until it all blows over. Off the road, the men pull up at the Edward Creek Railway siding, once a thriving base camp for the gang maintaining the Ghan railway line. It's now a depressing scene of neglect. The gigantic water purifier that once serviced the steam engines sits rusting in the heat haze of the arid plains. Next stop is the Peak Station Stock Camp. Owned by the famous Kidman Pastoral Company, the three adjoining stations, Anna Creek, the Peak and Stewart Creek, are all managed as one. Combined, these properties make up the biggest cattle run in the world. Malcolm gets directions to the camp. This country is only 2 days' drive from Sydney and Melbourne and a day's drive from Adelaide, but it could be another world. Teams work for weeks at a time, dawn to dusk, virtually all day in the saddle in 40-degree heat. Malcolm settles down for a yarn and a cuppa with Bull Rider, a young stockman whose real love is the rodeo circuit.
Tell me, where did you get that nickname, Bull Rider?
Oh, I just do a few rodeos now and again, and I'll just jump on a couple and trucking yards here and that, and they just give me that name.
What, wild bulls?
Oh, bulls, cows, steers, anything.
Anything, yeah. How long you been doing that?
Oh, I rode my first potty calf when I was 5, my first bull when I was 11.
How old are you now?
16.
16? And you've already been on the rodeo circuit up at Mount Isa and
Yeah.
Darwin? And
Yeah, done that.
any broken bones?
Oh, a couple. I'd broken rib, collarbone, ligament damage in my knee. So, oh,
That's not bad for a 16-year-old.
yeah, I'll be feeling it in the future, though.
Yeah.
It's a rugged lifestyle out here, and only the toughest survive the hard grind, the heat, the flies, the isolation, the constant travelling and the long hours day after day.
Old man rang up Eddie. He was,
What do you do at the weekends?
work.
Just work.
Oh, probably on average once a week we go back to the station, do the washing and that.
But if
Have a
there's work
shower.
to be done, you just stay out here the whole
Yeah, if
time.
there's work to be done, we'll stay out here.
Yeah.
Just throw it over again. No, I lost it down here.
When you go away, I reckon I'll get you all the real questions.
I'll get a work around.
Six months ago, this northern pocket had good local rains. Now the fats are mustered and drafted for the Adelaide market. The cattle are yarded for the night and the workhorses hobbled.
How long before the rib bones are ready?
Oh, they're ready now.
Can I have one?
No worries.
Good on you.
Tastes better with a bit of salt and tomato sauce on it.
Oh, I have the sauce. Kills the flavour of the meat.
Yeah? Oh, that's the main tucker out here. Plenty of meat and tomato sauce. Loaf of bread and you're in business.
Some beautiful meat.
Yeah.
Do these cattle from here sell well down Adelaide?
Oh, they're selling not too bad at the moment.
Yeah.
The market has dropped a lot, but it's still good money for good cattle.
I tell you what, that's as good a beef I had anywhere.
Yeah.
That's almost better than Kimberley beef.
Well, you come a long way for it.
I've got some salt.
No worries.
The men are already up and preparing for work when ominous clouds sweep in at sunrise. By mid-morning, the wind's up and the heat's unbearable. The stockmen have been in the saddle for 5 hours, mustering a new mob. Meals are always the same: billy tea, meat and bread. The weather's deteriorating and hot winds send the temperature soaring. The men, accustomed to this harsh environment, simply ignore the discomfort.
Push him up, big boy. Push him up. Push him up.
Before sundown, the cattle are yarded and tail tagged, ready for market. The road train's expected sometime during the night, and the mob must be ready to go at first light. Around midnight, the road train turns up just ahead of a raging storm and bogs. It'll be 2 weeks before the track's dry, so the cattle are turned out again. The men head back to the homestead, and Malcolm and Steve battle on towards Oodnadatta. Malcolm picks up souvenirs along the abandoned Gan track to Alice Springs.
There's not much left of the old Gan railway line now. Most of the tracks have been picked up and sent away for scrap metal, and the majority of the sleepers have been sent down to the capital cities for landscape gardening. But up in Alice Springs, there's a man who still comes out and selects certain sleepers for a very special purpose. And when I get to Alice Springs, I want to show you what he does with these sleepers.
In 1891, the original line finished at Oodnadatta, which grew into an important outpost until 40 years later, when the line ran all the way through to Alice Springs. With the Gan now bypassing the town, the impressive station has been turned into a museum. Everybody meets at the Pink Roadhouse, a tourist attraction set up by Adam and Lynn Pate, who've been running the place now for 18 years.
You're a bit of a personality around here with all the tourists, aren't you? I think you must try hard to sell Una and this place to the tourists, do you?
It's fairly easy to be famous out here. There's not a lot of people.
Not a lot of ladies.
No, not a lot of ladies, but my husband was pretty smart, and he promoted the outback using his name and my name, so when he's away, people aren't so disappointed if I'm about.
Tell me, why is it the Pink Roadhouse?
The Pink Roadhouse, we wanted to be different, and we wanted people to laugh about the outback, not take it too seriously.
Yeah. A lot more tourists are coming through, aren't they?
Oh yeah, like up until this year, we were getting a big wave. Every year the wave got bigger.
And of course, a lot of people now are travelling on this track, the Oodnadatta track, instead of using the main north-south highway, aren't they? Because
well, when the Stewart Highway was sealed, people imagined that we might fold, but actually it was better for us because a lot of four-wheel drivers don't want to go on a sealed road. And a lot of history. The Oodnadatta track is very historical, so there's a lot to see.
who called it the Oodnadatta track?
My husband Adam was instrumental in getting the Geographical Names Board to name it. He suggested the name in line with the Strzelecki track and the Birdsville track. It was unnamed when we first came here.
Yes. Now we're heading north from here, we're going up to Alice Springs, but is there anything very special in this area that we should see on the way north?
Well, I would suggest that you go in a south-westerly direction. We send most people through the Painted Desert.
The Painted Desert. Can you just show me on the map?
Show me this thing round Lyndhurst, by the way.
A few quick directions. And they're on their way again. After the rain, the morning's cool and the sky clear. The rich colours of these strangely eroded hills give the region its descriptive name, the Painted Desert. Before heading east to the Simpson, Malcolm sets out for Alice Springs. He drops in on a mate of his, John the Irishman.
How you going, mate? Hey, Malcolm, how are you?
I'm all right, man. How things?
Pretty good.
You still working on these sleepers, eh?
Yeah, well.
Just put him down there.
John goes down the track collecting the weathered railway sleepers that he transforms into unique pieces of furniture. Many of these sleepers are more than 50 years old and hard as rock.
Clean it up, it'll be a beautiful piece of furniture. But no one believes it. But I class this as a wonderful piece of jarrah. You know, you see them with a datum stamp in the end. Could be anything from 1914, 17, 37, 57. But you can make a beautiful piece of furniture out of this old sleeper. Most people use it for, you know, landscaping or firewood.
Have you got any furniture here now in Alice Springs made from this stuff?
Oh, everywhere in Alice.
Yes, I know there's some in your shed there. Can we go and have a look at it?
Yeah, sure
All right,
you
mate.
can.
Good on you. Right, I will have a look at it. To this stage...
John, a true craftsman, picked up his knowledge of timber travelling the world. He settled in Alice Springs and admits that, like any true Irishman, he still loves the liquor and a good fight. Although he says he drinks now only in moderation and hardly ever has a blue. He cuts and planes and shapes the old sleepers, getting right into the heart of the wood. The iron spikes are driven back in and 16 layers of clear finish bring out the true colours of the jarrah.
16.
Yep.
And that's...
This magnificent table stands concealed. John's reluctant to display it until it's been given that final coat of lacquer. It takes Malcolm hours of yarning to convince him that it will look good on film. It's almost impossible to visualise that this superb piece of Australian furniture came from discarded sleepers left to rot in the desert. The Irishman's reputation is growing, and his furniture's in demand all over Australia. A day's drive south from Alice Springs, well away from the main road, lies a vast area of eroded sandstone monoliths. The most awesome is Chambers Pillar. Shaped by 300 million years of erosion and stained by iron oxide. The mellow colours of the rocks change and intensify according to the time of day. Early explorers used the pillar as a landmark to record their time of arrival. Unfortunately, modern travellers are also leaving their ugly, unwanted graffiti. East of the pillar sprawls the Simpson Desert, covering an area around 170,000 square kilometres. It's the largest parallel sand dune desert in the world. "12 kilometres into the Simpson, between two huge dunes, is a quaint little homestead.
Well, I first heard about you at Oodnadatta from, what's his name, Adam, who's got the pink road now.
Living here is a remarkable woman, Molly Clark. At 69 years of age, she's developing a tourist venture on Old Andado. Molly lived on an adjoining station before retiring, and now she's restored the interior of this cottage to the 1920s period. Friends and relatives told her she was too old to cope. Now, during the cooler months, off-road tours arrive to camp for the night and soak up the pioneering atmosphere at Molly's place.
I was told that I was stupid and it was silly and I was a liability to my family and people, and I was told everything negative for about the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And now some of those same people look at me when I'm coming home and say, I wish I was coming with you. You're damn lucky having somewhere to get away from it all.
Yeah.
So see how it changes? I didn't collapse in a heap in the first 6 months. I didn't get into all the strife that they imagined and saw.
Right.
And they found out that you can live. What's the difference in living here or living up there? And after you kill enough, they don't like it and they don't come around so much.
Up there, to Molly, is Alice Springs. Every month or so, she drives to the Alice to collect her stores, but she prefers it here. She's even restored the original meat house and saddle shed. Molly has only one complaint: monster meat ants. Here at Oodnadatta, they consume everything in their path,
Get up inside slack.
even the garden. Molly has a constant battle to grow anything at all, and if she stands still for more than a few seconds, the ferocious ants attack. Today, they're particularly vicious. Down at the duck pen, the ants go berserk. Malcolm's never seen anything like it in 30 years of travelling around Australia. Molly always wears shorts at this time of the year so she can brush off the ants. It's a constant worry that if she has an accident, she may be overcome by the swarming insects.
I've got to get out of that.
Molly's such an indomitable character that she merely laughs and retreats to her house as Malcolm drives off into the Simpson Desert. All through this region are herds of camels, descendants of animals introduced into Australia between 1840 and 1907 as indispensable beasts of burden. When motor vehicles took over, the unwanted animals were released. Australia now has the only wild herds of camels in the world. No visit to the West Simpson is complete without a look at Dalhousie. Around 80 active springs overflow into small permanent creeks that run for several kilometres out into the desert. This pond, the biggest, is around 35 degrees, a relaxing respite for weary travellers. 2,000 kilometres away, rainfall on Australia's east coast began a long underground journey, forcing its way to the surface millions of years later in the heated artesian springs of Dalhousie. In the 1870s, during a period of rapid European settlement, the Dalhousie area was selected for a cattle station. The ruins of the first homestead stand on high ground a few kilometres from the main springs. Even today, this area is isolated. Over 100 years ago, when the stonemasons toiled here, it must have seemed like the end of the earth. Malcolm's about to head back to camp at the main thermal pools when the weather closes in and rain squalls make the track impassable. Over the next 4 hours, nature explodes in a magnificent display. At first light, the storms have dissipated, and camels seek out the pools of water left on the clay pans. palms planted by the Afghans thrive around the springs. The fruit matures in March and dingoes, scavengers of the desert, feed on the ripening dates. The Dalhousie Springs complex is a specific natural habitat. It's the home of many animals. And some, such as fish, would not usually be associated with the desert. Six species have been identified here. 3 of them are found nowhere else. The most common school in the shallows, and Malcolm traps some for a closer look.
There's big mobs in here. Yeah. Come in.
They're Dalhousie hardyheads. Like the other species here, they can tolerate extreme variations in warm water temperature. The hardyhead can dart briefly into the hottest parts of the pool, where the temperature's as high as 43 degrees, to feed on green algae growing there.
Here we are, guys. See you later.
"70 kilometres further east and well into the Simpson Desert is a unique man-made environment at Perney Bore. It was established in 1966 when the French Petroleum Company explored for oil here. And now boiling water spews out between the dunes. It's less than 30 years since the bore was put down, but already aquatic plants are flourishing. The seeds probably transported here by migratory water birds. Delicately coloured patterns like mosaics are laid down as the minerals crystallise in the cooling water. From here on, hundreds of dunes must be crossed.
When you're in this sand dune country, it's always a good idea to let out about half the amount of air that you'd normally run in a tyre, so you get it bowing out at the base here. Gives a wider section for the tyre to ride on the loose sand. If you don't let out at least half the air, you're going to find it's very difficult to get over the top of the dunes where the very loose sand is.
From Perney Bore east to Birdsville, there are 2 ways through the Simpson. The most direct follows the French line over hundreds of sand ridges, some as high as 10 metres. With the temperature in the mid-40s and the sand unbearably hot, it's increasingly difficult to cross the bigger dunes without putting unnecessary strain on the clutch. Whenever possible, sand mats and the winch are used. Most travellers cross the Simpson in winter, and it's easier to get over the dunes when the cooler, denser sand has been compacted by the many vehicles using the track. The recommended crossing is from west to east. Hot winds push the temperature up, so Malcolm decides to take the Rig Road, which runs further south. Constantly maintained during the years of oil exploration, it's now reverting to desert. As summer approaches, this region is the most inhospitable in Australia. Scorching winds sweep over the crests, reshaping the dunes. Encroaching sands creep across the track, and every year it becomes more difficult to travel this section. The road was originally graded to take drilling rigs into the desert. Little time's wasted covering the several hundred kilometres to reach the most famous landmark in the Simpson Desert. It's the junction of the three states, first surveyed by Augustus Popel. Until recently, travellers could drive their vehicles right up to the markers. There was massive erosion, so the park rangers erected shade cloth to trap the drifting sand.
This is the famous Popel's Corner in the middle of the Simpson Desert. This is where the three states meet. So if I stand right here, I'm in the Northern Territory. One step to my left, I am now in Queensland. And around the corner, a bigger step, and I am now in South Australia. Now, if you're not happy with this marker, about 20 metres over to my right is another one. So you can take your pick. Righto, next stop's Birdsville.
Although it's called a desert, the Simpson's not a barren wasteland, and even the biggest of the dunes supports a variety of drought-resistant vegetation.
This happens time and time again. You just about get over the top of the dunes and the tyres bite into this loose sand and the diff housing goes down and you're stuck. The tops of these sand dunes are very, very soft. You can see this sand is like talcum powder. Because once you bite into it, well, there's no bottom to it. Now, if you've got the right equipment, you can get over the top of these dunes fairly quickly.
Malcolm uses a power jack inflated with exhaust gases to lift each side of the Toyota. Vehicles bog easily on the dunes, and without recovery equipment like power jacks, sand mats and winches, the trip would be a battle all the way. The main obstacle encountered in the Simpson has been named Big Red, an impressive dune. It's an almost impossible challenge. From the top, Sculptured sand patterns are briefly visible when the wind drops.
Well, that's the end of the sand dunes for a while. So now the first thing I have to do is to get some air back into these tyres. The simplest way is to carry a few metres of hose with professional tyre clips on the end. So all I have to do is rather go to the back there, up the top here, and take some of the air out of these tyres and transfer it quickly down into the other tyres. Now before I came out into the desert, I put twice as much pressure, air pressure in these tyres and the one on the top that I normally do, so I can take half the pressure out of this and bring it back to the normal road pressure and it'll be right.
East of Big Red, towards Birdsville, the scenery changes dramatically. Part of the Diamantina River floodplain. This is prime cattle grazing country. The flightless emu is Australia's biggest bird. In this remote area, they show no fear of man. The famous Birdsville Hotel is a legendary symbol of the bush, but with the main street now sealed, it looks more suburban than outback. Reaching Birdsville is still a real challenge for most travellers, and every year 40,000 pass through here. In part 2 of Along the Tracks with Malcolm Douglas, he'll continue his travels down the Birdsville track through the enveloping dust storms to observe the abundant bird life on the floodplain of the Cooper Creek, and meet up with Talc Alf, sculptor and inventor. Heading north again along the Strzelecki track, he'll reach Inaminka, canoe and fish the Cooper, and continue on through the red sand dune country to the famous Dig Tree, where the explorers Burke and Wills perished. Be sure to watch part 2 of Along the Tracks with Malcolm Douglas.